It's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for spending time today. We're really lucky to have Omar and Kevin with us today. So maybe we will start out by having Kevin and Omar give a little bit more about their backgrounds, their story at both Credit Karma and Blue Kai. But specifically, let's talk about how Blue Kai and then Credit Karma respectively are data marketplace or data services. So Omar, why don't we start with you? Just talk about a little more yourself and like what is a data service in Blue Kai, how that fits in.
So Blue Kai, we started with a very simple vision, which is how can we help change marketing from something that's kind of gut-driven to something that's completely data-driven if we could somehow get really reliable data on what people are buying and looking to buy into the marketing ecosystem, then instead of targeting a page or a keyword, people would actually deliver ads to people. And we created, one of the biggest marketplaces where people could actually contribute data into a system, and then people would come in and buy that data, and it became a very large marketplace. And then later in our evolution, we started selling software for people to manage their own data, and then Oracle acquired us and made us the data cloud. What Oracle does, I can summarize in like 20 seconds, is we help people understand consumers in terms of what they say, what they do, and what they buy. And then we help them connect the identities of these people across, all the different devices that they use to actually express themselves. And with that, they can then personalize, target, and measure. And that's what we do.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here. So Credit Karma is always free access to your credit score and credit reports from both TransUnion and Equifax. We're very mission-oriented, so our data as a service really is about consumer empowerment through financial education. And think of the data that we get access to as really kind of the engagement platform that drives consumers regularly back to our site. I think what motivates all of us is to get good grades, right? So either you've got a great credit score and you want to protect it, or you're not where you want to be and you want to improve it. And it's, again, an always free service for consumers. And the business model is essentially a lead generation platform for our banking partners, which is my responsibility as the head of partnerships, where we have relationships with the major banks across verticals such as personal loans, auto loans, credit card, et cetera. I've been with the company for about 8 months, and then, so that's my B2C hat as it comes to this panel. But before joining Credit Karma, I was at a company called ComScore. Hopefully many of you are familiar with ComScore, for 13 years, running financial services there the last 4. So I also have a very heavy B2B perspective when it comes to this topic.
Cool. So maybe we'll start by this concept of data marketplaces. And interesting, both companies collect data from a third-party source almost, and kind of not to resell it, but reuse it in a different way. So one for consumers and one for enterprise. Maybe, Kevin, start with you. You're collecting data scores. So let's talk about the data sources you collect and then how you think about monetizing that specifically with these leads for other businesses.
Yeah, sure. So I think what the founders of Credit Karma did that was different, and one of the things I want to communicate here is that, just like Phil was saying, like Evernote wasn't the brightest or the most unique innovation, right? There were already business models in place to get consumers access to credit score and credit reports. And if you remember, there were a lot of commercials running with these guys in a band talking about freecreditreport.com, and you would go to that site, you would provide your credit card, and it would be free for a week, and then they would start charging you a monthly fee. And the founders of Credit Karma were like, why shouldn't it just be free always? And that wasn't a brilliant idea in and of itself, right? I'm sure others had considered it, so part of it is certainly execution and motivation and getting it done. But at the end of the day, now Experian, who owned freecreditreport.com, talks about that as their legacy business, kind of like how AOL talks about dial-up. And so it's truly disrupted the marketplace to kind of just flip the business model on its head. It's not data that wasn't around before or accessible to consumers, or that other companies couldn't do the types of deals that Credit Karma ultimately did. It was just the unique position that this should be always free from a consumer empowerment and education standpoint that really set the company off on the trail to the point that now we've got roughly 38 million members. We're hoping to be to 45 to 50 million by the end of the year. And it really is kind of this continual updating of the credit score, credit report, tools and services that identify where you're succeeding and where you can improve, that keep the engagement flywheel going, if you will. And then certainly it is a very unique data asset when it comes to our partners at the banks who, when we think about it, the way that we earn money is when an account gets approved or a loan gets funded. And the reason we do that and don't focus on in-session optimization and really drive towards lifetime value is that the brand of Credit Karma is successful when our members get access to the products and services that they want, and our partners get access to the types of consumers that they value for their business, and using the credit score and credit report to really tailor the experience such that somebody with a 600 credit score is not seeing an ad for an American Express card because they will not get qualified. They won't get approved. And that's really kind of how we leverage the data to create an advantage for our partners to drive really profitable customers at scale.
Cool. I think it's like the adage that the next great idea is making today's idea better, right? And so that's kind of a wrinkle of a business model. So Omar, talk about the different data sources that Oracle's data cloud and BlueKai specifically collects. And it's both first-party data, as I understand it, plus third-party data. And how do you motivate, are these free sources you're getting from third parties? Are you motivating them by buying them? Explain how that marketplace of buying and reusing data works.
Absolutely. So let me step back. When we set out to build BlueKai, we had to solve this really hard economic problem, which is say, if I bring to you a painting and I put it in front of here and it's a single painting and I say we're going to bid on that painting, it's really easy to run a marketplace because only one of you is going to win and you're going to compete till you find the true price. When you look at data assets, the problem is they're infinitely sellable. You could just keep repeating how many times you create that, and the cost of distribution is near zero. So what's the driver of value? Well, it's uniqueness. And that's the problem, is that the second you give out data, even though you can repeat how many times you give it out, it decreases in value because now everybody knows it. Who's going to pay a spy if they read the news in the newspaper? Nobody. And so how the heck do you create a marketplace like that? So we came up with a simple idea that had some notion of scarcity to the creation of data. So when you go to a place like one of the travel sites and type trip to Hawaii, and we signed up, by the way, instantly we signed up 2 of the largest travel sites immediately. So we had large coverage instantly, and in real time, while someone was typing, I'm looking for a trip to Hawaii, hit go, all the media players would come in, all the media companies would bid in real time to get access to that data, and once they had it, they'd serve targeted advertisements elsewhere. After you left the commerce site, you start to see ads on Yahoo and Google and other places. So that's how we started, and man, the business just grew very quick. Because that concept was, oh my God, now instead of looking for data on a page that's on a news site that says Obama showed up to Hawaii, that doesn't tell you anything useful about targeting an ad, I can get my data from somewhere else. And we had a 2-sided marketplace and it grew very fast. Here's the hilarious thing about all that. With all the kind of interesting economic thinking behind that marketplace, we would basically sign up commerce players, media guys. When data got used, we'd have a transaction fee and take our part, and then the revenue would flow to the data creator. So now people who created websites, instead of just showing ads to make money, they would tap into our ecosystem and make money for data exhaust coming off of their website without showing any ads. Great business model. It grew. 2 years later, we had this really unfortunate insight that helped us grow more, but hurt the inner economist in me, which is that most people didn't want to buy data. They actually wanted to buy media informed by data. So what we ended up doing is coming up with a non-real-time pricing model, putting our data out in every media, publisher, ad network, DSP. They would sell bundles. They would sell an ad targeted to a person going to Hawaii, and then they'd pay us a usage fee for the data, which is very interesting. Because I think the idea of a dynamic real-time marketplace for data was a little bit ahead of time, and really what you needed was a marketplace for ads informed by data, and that continued to help us grow.
It's interesting. It's both. So I think there's a distinction just brought up between data itself and content or ads or media on the data, right? And so the reality is we talk a lot about big data and the value of data, but outside there's not enough data scientists out there that can actually use the data intelligently. And so your customers really want to have applied uses of the data, right? So talk a little bit more about that. That learning's like everyone in the room either has a company or think about companies on mining data. There's both picks and shovels, tools like Hadoop or databases or data mining, but then there's using the data somehow, and so you're not actually reselling data, you're reselling an applied use of data. So maybe talk about what other sources of data out there you would use and how you apply data besides ads or content.
Yeah, a lot there. First of all, there were two types of users of our data. The first was the ad agencies would come in, and surprisingly, with all the data we had about exactly what you were searching for 10 minutes ago, and how much wealth you had, and what your interests were, and what your location was, with all that data, there's still a huge amount of agencies coming in and saying, I want a female, 34 to 40 years old. And it's just basic demographic data. And it always surprised me how long the old paradigms still maintain. But a lot of people now have been triggering more on the new paradigms. And so you have the agencies coming in and saying, I'm Mercedes, I want to buy a segment of people looking for Mercedes, Lexus, and Infiniti. So that's prescriptive. They know exactly what they're coming to the marketplace to buy. But there's this emerging economy of algorithm experts who take the data and say, I don't really care that it's Mercedes. I'm going to take your 30,000 attributes, and my algorithm could care less. They're just numbers, and we're going to optimize the heck out of it. And when we see somebody click on the ad and then convert, or convert and then do sales, my algorithm is going to ask for more of your data, buy the data, and write you a bigger check. So we've seen that part of the marketplace grow quite nicely. Then there's another emerging part of the ecosystem, which is say, forget ads, let's put it on websites. Let's optimize conversion. So we'd see, a telco carrier just do some very simple things that say, is this someone who generally would want Android or iPhone? And change their content messaging on the landing page, and bam, handset sales would spike up. So you see applications like that. You see applications similar to that where you do a search on a carrier's website for a particular type of phone, and 10 minutes later you see a promoted tweet or a post on Facebook responding to that data. And those tend to be kind of real-time algorithm-driven, and that's rising a lot, and it goes way beyond banner ads.
Interesting. It's it reminds me that another aphorism we use when I look at companies that more data trumps better math. Right, and it's this literally the lesson learned from big data and the data economy is people have better algorithms or better data science, machine learning models. But the truth is more data trumps better math. So even if you have an arguably better algorithm, the fact that you have access to more data or better data basically will beat any algorithm any day of the week. So when you think about collecting more data, maybe back to Kevin, as you've been in a couple of businesses now, both ComScore and the Credit Karma. Random question, what other source of public data or accessible data out there that you at Credit Karma or you as an executive think that people should be thinking about? Government data, social data, Twitter data? I mean, what data sources out there do you look out in your life or around you do you think people should be thinking about monetizing in some sort of service?
So I'm going to start a business, right, for you guys. Great question. No,
I've got my checkbook ready to fund it.
Perfect.
So.
No, I've got, gave this a little bit of thought. I have a bias because I was at a conference last week in the auto insurance space. But I think a lot of folks I've been talking to that we interact with at Credit Karma are trying to build clearinghouses, if you will, for data assets. And one of which that's coming is if you've seen all of the advertisements for Progressive Insurance talking about Snapshot, where you plug a device into your car and they utilize that information based on, hey, the speed limit's 35, you're driving 40, you're braking really quickly, to understand how they should underwrite and price your insurance. Progressive has a head start in that, but ultimately they're not going to own that data. You as a consumer, usage-based insurance are going to want to take and have portability in that information to say, through my mobile phone, you've been observing how I corner, how I drive, how I accelerate, how I brake. I'm not happy with the insurance rate I'm getting from XYZ. So here is that data. And right now, there is no direct access and portability to that type of consumer information. And I think ultimately that's what we want, right? We understand that our data is out there. I don't think that data breaches, et cetera, demonstrably change how we interact or how we behave. But what we do feel like we want as consumers is ownership and the right to have that data, make our lives better, more affordable, simpler. And that's really tying it back to Credit Karma, where we focus on our relationships and integrations is really driving three core tenets, frankly. One is certainty. So that gets back to the approval process. Transparency. which certainly usage-based insurance is intended to drive, but our platform, just as it stands at Credit Karma, and then simplicity, right? It should be seamless. It should be that Amazon one click for purchasing a set of goods from their site should be available in financial services as well with the right data and the right integrations with partners.
It's interesting. So Kevin's talked about giving up your personal data as a source, like how you drive your car as an example, and creating a marketplace out of that. But I'll turn this question to Omar. I mean, that's very personal, private data. How do you feel as a consumer potentially giving up your driving habits, not that implying you drive fast or slow, or healthy or not, but how do you feel about giving up that data in exchange for cheaper insurance, right?
Yeah, 90% of people, if you ask them if they're great drivers, say they're above average, which is impossible. I'm the 10% that sucks, I'll tell you right now. We thought about that when we created Blue Kai, in that we wanted to have a consumer play where we felt like the data industry, and actually your business is really good about what I'm about to say. The data industry a long time ago was in the shadows. Everyone would collect all this data, but you had no control over it. It was not transparent. And here you are at the play giving the consumer control. We thought the whole industry should go that way. And what we did is we made all the data we create transparent, and we tried to convince all the websites we work with to put a little widget on the website that says, hey, maybe if you showed consumers what data that was known about them and they could edit it and control it, first of all, they'd be less scared. The fact that we know they're in market, for Mercedes, but we purposely never want to know something deeply financially personal or something about your health or something about your drinking or adult, we'd never touch those data assets. We thought people would be comfortable with that. And so we went to this transparent model, but it was still B2B, and we weren't ready for B2C because it's still a geeky subject, at least 7 years ago, and I think we're still a few years away. All the conversation about data today is fear-driven or fame-driven. So fear-driven is, oh my God, look what they know about you, run for the hills, and it's a cartoon discussion. You can't really have a useful discussion about, because it's inevitable. We are now in a world where we will create digital exhaust in everything we do. We're not going backwards in time where you're not going to be able to use data. So you need ways to have fair use and transparency of it. But the problem is the fear is what dominates and sells the articles, and so that's what they're doing. The only other use of data we have today is fame. You're on Facebook, look at my picture, I'm great, hit 22 likes, right? Those are the two things. What we need is some sort of utilitarian or maybe even greed-motivated discussion of data, which is, hey, I'm gonna be like a bank for you. Contribute your data in, and you're going to be able to buy things cheaper, and you're going to be able to travel to Hawaii every 2 years because your data is so darn useful. I think we will get to that point, but we're probably a few years away because the size of the data economy, independent of all the other uses, has to be in the tens of billions of dollars in direct consumer access for you to be able to fund people taking a trip to Hawaii.
Okay, so you made an interesting comment there. Couple things. One, this notion of digital exhaust, that every click, every shake, every accelerate on your phone creates a data trail. Number two, you talked about this concept of a digital data bank, a personal bank that kind of controls your information. Kevin alluded to it as well. But the third thing is this marketplace idea. Can I use that digital bank of information personally as currency, right? And you have Bitcoins, maybe you have data coins or some crazy analog where you use this data to buy stuff. Maybe back to Kevin, since you've done with the consumers, where are we on this cultural level to use data to buy stuff? I mean, in one hand, it happens already, right? The fact that we subscribe to Gmail and other services for free, we're effectively using our personal exhaust to buy a free service. But talk about culturally this active notion of giving up your data versus clicking through terms of service mindlessly. Where are we in that kind of spectrum?
I certainly have a bias working for the companies that I have, but I also see it, in my colleagues, friends, et cetera, where, and I think you all do the same thing. We just accept the terms of use. We know our data is out there, right? It's just a matter of how and in which ways and what the return is to us personally for giving up that data in that equation. So I think the way that we think about our business at Credit Karma is that you have Facebook as your identity platform for your social life. You have LinkedIn as your identity platform for your professional life. And we believe that Credit Karma can step up and be the identity platform for your financial life. Because there's this inherent trust when you're clicking on those terms of use that you give us consumer consent to pull your credit report and to provide that information to you for empowerment. And so getting back to this kind of data vault in this store, we don't see a reason why you can't come to our website and essentially click on your vault for your home and see all of the information associated with your household, whether that's your homeowner's policy, neighborhood watch information, et cetera. And you could do the same for your car vault and the same for your bank vault, et cetera. And so we are very optimistic in terms of kind of that equation, in terms of what consumers are willing to relinquish in terms of personal data and information in exchange for a level of security, a level of trust, as well as a level of return in terms of those ideals that I pointed to earlier in terms of such as transparency, as well as simplicity.
So this notion of a personal data stream makes sense, what I like, don't like, and ultimately it just ends up selling ads or targeted products. If the Supreme Court's correct and corporations are people too, Omar, right, and they have free speech, do corporations have a data exhaust? I mean, think about the data models you guys talked about, and this may not be your business, but is there such a thing as a data vault for a corporate entity as well that's valuable?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, our marketplace is corporations that create data about consumers and corporations that want data about consumers. So the consumer isn't actually the contributor of the data, the creator of the data. So I believe this will be a growing economic model that you will create digital exhaust that you will be able to sell out in the marketplace. I mean, we run a sizable and growing business only on that. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is a very interesting area. Now, it adds needs for us to put self-regulation on. It's not the business that actually creates the data, it's the consumer. Yeah. So what are the rules on that? Going back to one of your questions on some of the areas that's next, that I would love to see somebody come up with the following model. Like, I'm super interested in seeing it. I think the idea of locking down your digital exhaust is near impossible. Like, you're being tracked in so many different ways. Perhaps there's a model for someone to create enough digital noise that no one will be able to know the actual real you unless they gave you value. Anyway, just a challenge. If you come up with a business model, please let me know.
So you mentioned regulation and the kind of that security. So it's a topic that always hits kind of the headlines, and maybe a couple of minutes on this topic. Thoughts about the industry as a whole, regulating, securing this data around both consumer and enterprises. So maybe, Kevin, quickly to you, because you deal with personal financial information, which is super sensitive. When you think about it, you're 2 steps away from like identity theft, right?
Yeah, so I was lamenting the fact that we are acting internally more and more like a bank already, as a 300-person company, and that is because of the type of data that we interact with and that we are entrusted with, and so it is absolutely the right thing to do. The other thing that I'm encouraging my team to do, because we get frustrated by the regulations and limitations, and you cannot use certain data for marketing purposes, et cetera. And we were just coming across this issue as we're building up our auto insurance practice, and there's a law, the Driver Privacy and Protection Act, the DPPA, which limits how you can use driver's license information, vehicle information. I use the great source Wikipedia to just take a look at what started this law, and it was actually in the 80s where there were a couple of high-profile murders of stars that were tracked by stalkers through the DMV registration information. Right, and so there are sound and legitimate and necessary reasons why regulations exist, and I think that was a good lesson for us to be mindful that yes, while they do slow innovation, they slow kind of what we're trying to do as an organization. They also have a place, and to find that right balance is critical.
So maybe if you volunteer, raise your hands. How many people here have been like victims of identity theft or fake credit cards, and so it's this digital exhaustive personal thing. And then just for Kevin's, like, how many people have kind of a credit watch on your credit score monthly? Yeah, it's interesting. And so there is I did this panel similar at another conference probably 2 years ago, and probably a third of the people had kind of credit watches, because to this point around regulation and self-regulating your own data wasn't as important. And I think I think Omar said earlier, both the industry has to think regulation, but quite frankly, you asked if anyone out there has a business model how we individuals can create tools around monitoring exhaust, managing our exhaust, and then ultimately monetizing our own exhaust would be valuable, right? Because the fact that protect, monitor, and then ultimately use a currency down the line when it's there. And it's not an easy thing to do, but you could probably create a business selling that kind of personal auditing trail if possible. I think we have about 3 minutes, so I want to take a couple questions from the audience via this app. For both entrepreneurs and executives in the data space, just yay or nay in 2 sentences, is the data space overcrowded? This whole data boom, big data conversation. Kevin, is it too many data companies out there or not enough?
I'm going to go with not enough. I think the great thing is that everybody has access to the same data, right? So whether you go to Facebook or another media entity or kind of what we're looking at is we can buy the same data from all the same parties. So I think the real innovation is combining those assets differently than anybody else has. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. And I think there's opportunity for companies to do that better than what's being done today.
Omar, you've been in this business, 7-year founder, run at Blue Kai. More opportunity out there, or?
First, two answers. There's way too many companies doing the same thing. Way too few companies jumping 2 generations ahead of where we're going to be. And obviously, you want to make money today, so that's why. Yeah. And it's harder to do that. But there's huge opportunity if people really look out into new areas.
Yeah, I think the distinction that I use, there's N+1 business models and N+2. Right, to the point is there's a lot of incremental N+1, which are very good and very reasonable and kind of the next thing, and that's today. But then, as an investor, we also look for N+2. And oftentimes that may be N+4 because it's way out there. But ultimately, if you find a business that starts today, like on the personal exhaust where you protect, then N+3 might be monetizing your personal data down the line. We have about 90 seconds left, so maybe closing thoughts in terms of this kind of data as a service, data marketplaces. Are we at a point where a data marketplace will be as like an Uber, Airbnb, where you see exchanges pop up between buyers and sellers in different verticals? How far out do you think that is? I mean, you guys have created many versions of this in your own businesses. Where are we around for this kind of notion of like an Airbnb, Uber type of model out there where people are okay with it? I'm going to start with Kevin.
I'm not sure I have a direct answer to the question other than to say, we look very closely at how consumers interact. And I talked about wanting good grades earlier. We're also very competitive with our peers and want to understand how we compare within our neighborhoods, within our communities. And that's a great re-engagement tool that we're looking at because I think from that sharing perspective, it's not like I can give you 50 points of my credit score, but certainly how can I look at my peers and understand what behaviors are driving them to the type of financial security that I want for my own life, and enabling that is certainly an area of opportunity for us.
Yeah, the billion-dollar size marketplaces that I'm currently focused on are B2B buyers and sellers of data where they're buying about the C, about the consumer. Where you get to the Airbnb model where it's going to be billions of dollars where the consumer's a direct party, that's a few years out.
Got it. Well, hey, thank you very much for your time. Maybe we can all, as the audience, thank both Kevin and Omar for their insights today.